Thank you. My relationship with money first began with $10 of allowance each month from my mom. And I had a plan for this money. It involved getting onto my banana seat bicycle with the orange traffic flag in the back to keep me safe in traffic, and pedaling hard with that $10 bill of prosperity in my pocket. You see, I had to get to the 7-Eleven store fast before that bill burned a hole in my pocket, fell out onto the road behind me, and was lost forever. Once at the store, I would carefully make my way up and down the candy aisle, making my selections so as to best use all of my allowance. And in those days, there were penny candies, which allowed me to literally spend every last cent. Later, once I got home with my loot, I would gobble it down almost immediately with nothing left to show for it. But I felt satisfied. And I looked ahead to the next month and another $10 when I could do it all again. See, at this point in my life, my brain, my values, and my banana seat bicycle all operated on just one gear. I wasn't equipped to shift gears yet. Speed ahead several years later to when I was then in high school. I had more than a mile to travel to get to school each day, and the last leg of that journey involved a left-hand turn, which took me alongside the student parking lot. Each morning and afternoon, I would walk alongside that lot, gazing inward at the upperclassmen coming and going in cars of their own. I wanted nothing more than to be so independent and so cool as to join them with my own car. My mother shared in this desire of mine, as she had had more than enough of chauffeuring me around. She too wanted me to have my own car, and she made me this offer. She agreed to match me dollar for dollar in saving to buy my first car. With that offer, I shifted gears. I was 14 and had just under 2 years left in order to save and have a car by my 16th birthday. I got my first job working weekends, making minimum wage, which at that point was a whopping $3.35 an hour. How did I do? I am proud to report that I saved $900, exactly one half of the price tag of one tired little 1984 Mazda 626 with more than 100,000 miles on it. This was not the coolest car in the North Medford High School parking lot, nor was I the coolest kid. But it didn't matter. I was on top of the world. The act of saving for and buying this car had shifted my priorities from satisfying the now to tending to later, from spending to saving. Perhaps this drove me into my profession to become an accountant. Speed even further ahead to now. In more than 20 years of working as a CPA, I have met many people who find it difficult to get ahead financially. They don't know how. Or perhaps they know how and they've been doing like they've been told, yet try as they may, they still can't seem to get ahead. It can be difficult balancing our priorities. How do we get ahead? When riding a bicycle or driving a car, we shift gears in order to move ahead more quickly and easily. I'm here today to suggest that getting ahead financially also involves shifting gears and shifting our values around money. Here are some examples of differing money values. My niece, she was about 7 one summer when she was visiting me, and we spent a day at the amusement park, which ran me about $100 between 2 tickets, meals, games, locker. At the end of the day, when I asked her what she wanted to do the next day, she enthusiastically replied, "Let's go to Six Flags again." My response here to her was a little dishonest when I said, "Honey, I don't have the money for that." But like a kid, she took me literally and offered up the perfect solution. She said, "Well, let's go to the ATM and get some more then." Now she's 17. Several months ago, she exercised her financial freedom when she elected to spend $500 of her own money in a week, primarily on fast food for her and her friends, with an emphasis on fast, meaning how quickly she spent her money on it. She now regrets this, as she has $500 less in her account than she would otherwise, and nothing to show for it. Suffice it to say, this mistake allowed her to shift gears. I have a pal with very different money values. He is the biggest penny pincher of anyone I've ever known. He goes to outrageous lengths to avoid spending money so that he can save it instead. For him, this is all a game. He will wear his clothing down to the point that it is falling apart and nearly falling off of him, because he wants as much value out of anything he owns before he has to pay to replace it. I don't know what's going on with his shoes. He has a policy of not turning the heat on in the house prior to Thanksgiving so that he can save on the power bill. He buys gallons of milk to drink, even though it's more than he ideally would, because, you see, he has calculated exactly how much of the gallon he has to drink to get his money's worth relative to a half gallon, which, while being less expensive, is more expensive per ounce, and then makes sure to drink at least that much of the gallon every single time. The result of this behavior for him is he has done a Herculean job of saving money and is pretty much retired at a young age. I greatly admire what he has done. However, for myself, I prefer to live in a 70-degree house in the wintertime and to expand my beverage choices beyond milk. But our values differ. I now ask you, where do your values lie? Which gear are you driving in? And more importantly, how do we know if we are driving in the wrong gear? When we're riding a bicycle, if we're in too low of a gear, we know it because our legs are spinning fast. In a car, the engine is working really hard and the RPMs are high, and we're not getting along as quickly as it feels like we should be for the energy that we're expending. The same goes for our money. Here's what a low gear looks like. My mom had a non-traditional career path. She started her first job as a registered nurse well after my sister and I were born, and also after the divorce from my dad. That job came complete with great benefits, which included a pension. This was 40 years ago when pensions were still quite common. And that was an agreement that an employer would make with its employees to pay out a future income stream to them once they retire. She was about 10 years into her career when her employer, like many companies around the United States, elected to terminate that pension, thereby eliminating any future obligation to make payments. She was in her 50s when she received a check of just $30,000 intended to cover all of her retirement. Panic set in for her. Never before had she felt the need to plan for her future. She'd previously relied on husbands and more recently on her employer to take care of that for her. But now she had this tiny nest egg in her possession. It was her responsibility to grow it, and she didn't have much time to do it in. Separately, I was about 10 when my dad landed a big job and started buying big things. He bought a huge new house, a brand new Lincoln Continental to drive, and a shiny, deluxe barbecue grill. All on credit and all banking on the promotion that he saw coming shortly down the line and the pay raise that would come with it, allowing him to pay for these things later. Except that promotion never came. What came instead were knocks at the door. First they came and drove away our car. Then they came and took back our barbecue grill. We didn't even own the barbecue. Eventually, we lost the house too. Both of my parents, in their separate situations, were slapped with the need to shift gears and fast. I will say they both ended up okay financially, but not without a lot of hard driving to get there. I was young when I witnessed this, and it left a strong impression on me. I learned that the sooner you shift gears, the easier the drive will be. Nonetheless, I too started out driving in a low gear. I graduated college and landed my first real job, complete with a 401k, which I elected not to participate in right away because I had some other things I wanted to do with my money first, and I had some student loans to pay off. Besides, I felt like I knew what to do. After all, I was an accountant. I made a budget to contain my spending with the intention of having something left over at the end of the month to put into my 401k. Each month I would work that budget, and yet each month I would fall short. I wasn't getting ahead. I needed to shift gears, and I knew it, because I didn't want to end up in the position my parents had. Here's what I did. I shifted my order of operations. I began participating in my 401k as much as I could muster because I saw this as paying myself. And paying myself was the first thing that I wanted to do because I was working hard for my money and I believed I deserved to keep some before giving it to anybody else, like a landlord, a car dealership, the government, because a piece of what I was putting in here would have otherwise been paid to the IRS in taxes, but I was keeping it instead. And with that out of the way, I was then free to spend the rest. No budget required and good riddance because budgeting hadn't been working for me anyway. Once I shifted my order of operations, I began moving ahead. Here's how that looked for me. It was money in the bank to pay for an emergency without having to borrow from somebody. It was being paid money on my investments instead of having to pay interest on debt. It was a good night's sleep knowing that I was doing the right thing for me. Doing the right thing gets a little bit of a bad rap. Exercising when we'd rather sit on the couch, or snacking on vegetables when there's chocolate cake in the fridge too. Savings is considered to be a sacrifice until we shift gears. When I really started contributing to my 401k, I felt the squeeze in a smaller paycheck for a little bit, but eventually I got used to it and I even forgot about it until that first 401k statement arrived in the mail. I opened it and I was surprised and delighted to not just remember that I had been doing this, but to see that my balance was growing. At that moment, saving felt celebratory to me. This was paying myself and having something left for me. And that is the value shift that began moving me forward. My pal from earlier with the Herculean savings habit, he doesn't mind dressing in extra layers to stay warm in the house in the winter. Passing up spending for him is never a sacrifice. It's only an opportunity. How did that girl with the banana seat bicycle and the old car turn out? In my early years of driving, my biggest fear was to have a car repair that I wouldn't be able to afford. I feared this almost as much as I feared death. As a result, every strange noise in that car would cause my stomach to jump up into my throat for fear of what could be wrong. I drove that tired little car for 7 years. She got me all the way through college before the transmission fell out with the worst sound of all. I cried. I couldn't shift those gears anymore. Recently, I was driving through town in the car that I now have, and something sounded a little off. But I was surprised that my stomach stayed put. My previous anxiety around this is gone. A costly car repair will no longer break me. I've got this. That is security. This is my financial freedom, and it makes the 16-year-old girl in me giddy. Shift gears, shift your order of operations, and shift forward to get ahead. Managing our money really can be just like riding a bicycle. Thank you.